It's like a what is it? Is it Ron? No, it's not Ron Burgundy. What's Will Ferrell's name in Talladega Nights where he's like, I don't know
Ricky
what to do
Bobby.
with my Ricky Bobby. Thank you. I can't believe
I
I
don't know
forgot
what to do with
that.
my hands.
Yeah.
No, not that kind of stuff. It's like the cool stuff, like my banner, flags. You know, I'm on brand. I'm wearing my favorite jacket.
Feeling
Felt
good
like
today,
being
huh?
dressed up today. You know,
Oh, I was going to draw a picture on my board. Everybody's always looking to see what's on my board, but I was sure to erase it just on the off chance there might be something offensive up there. My kids like to come in here, draw pictures, write stuff about each other on there, and so I made sure to erase that before we started. But I could have put my bracket on there, my NCAA bracket,
Yeah.
so I could tip my hand to who
if
the.
it didn't have Arkansas going all the way, I wouldn't have been interested in seeing it.
Well, we all know that's not going to happen.
Well, how do you
They.
know? No, nobody thought Arkansas was going to win the SEC tournament either, and yeah, we did, didn't we?
True.
Well,
Never can tell.
as long
Yeah.
as I mean, I'm good with Arkansas doing well, going deep. They can win it for all I care. But as long as the team up north doesn't do well, I'm happy. And my
Which
Buckeyes.
team up north?
On North.
Well, there's only one. When you're from Ohio, there's only one team that's from north of you. We just don't speak their name.
It's the Voldemort of basketball.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't care that much about basketball either, but I don't really pay attention until this time of the year. Yeah, we usually like to talk football, but that's out of season. And of course, if you're from Arkansas, you don't, you want to talk about basketball this year. You couldn't wait till the football season got over.
No, but that's been kind of the way it's been for the last like 4 or 5 years. I've not been thrilled with our football program since Ohio State cheated us out of the Sugar Bowl. Just to
Of course,
put it out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely played with players that were cheaters, documented cheaters, lost your coach because of it, but they still allowed them to play in the Sugar Bowl that they beat Arkansas on. We should have won that game.
Well,
bunch of freaks.
Yeah, I mean the SEC, when Ohio State, they had to hire a coach from the SEC to learn how to cheat so they could win again.
No. Jim Tressel was the man that was fired for cheating. Of course, let's think about this in real terms. What Tressel did in allowing all those guys to sell stuff is perfectly legal now.
Yeah, it's legal now.
And encouraged. It sucks. I don't want to talk about NIL. It pisses me off. I think that when we're paying, I'm going to say this, and it can be on the thing. When we're paying, quote, college athletes to go to multiple schools, never get a degree, because if you go to 4 schools in 4 years playing at all this, you will not have a degree. And many of these guys can hardly pass a college entrance exam or score more than 15 on an ACT. And we're paying them millions of dollars. This is what's wrong with America today. Our priorities are screwed up. So, as far as I'm concerned, I used to love college sports. I could give a flip anymore.
Yeah. See, I'm a college wrestling basketball guy, and that for a long time was not as impacted as football and basketball, but even that has gotten outrageous. There's guys getting multi-million-dollar NIL deals to wrestle, and it's like, that was meant to be an amateur sport.
It was meant to be an amateur sport, WWE. You're not talking about that kind of right. You're not talking about wrestling. You're talking about wrestling.
No.
Yeah. Down in South, all we got is wrestling. Let's talk about StalkTalk. Play the intro. And we did. All right. Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of StalkTalk. We are here today, Matt Dahle and Chad Stone from All Ball, Matt from First Seed Trials. We are going to talk about all things seed treatment, seed enhancement, biological, and seed trials. And a lot of things to go into the conversation here. And I think, right off the bat, as we're going to start, this could be a little bit more technical, which, as many of you who know me, means I'm going to probably say something stupid in this conference because I'm not a technical guy. But Chad, I want to talk immediately about what's going on in the seed treatment realm right now, particularly how y'all are seeing shifts going from, let's call it the traditional chemistry seed treatments that we have really seen rural seed for the last many decades, over to, it seems like, a very large amount of biological products that are coming into the marketplace. How are, and of course, All Ball has their own biological products. How are you seeing the shift going across? How big is the shift? Are you even seeing a position where chemistry may start really falling off with seed treatments, or is that kind of a foundational experience? So a lot there to unpack. So I'm just lobbing a big old softball at you.
Yeah, well, it's definitely changing, and it's changed pretty fast in the last 5 years, I would say. It's interesting. I worked at another company 20 years ago, Todd, that you and I both, I think, were there at the same time. But at that time, seed treatments were really, it was pretty much all synthetic chemistry, and there were some biologicals, but we didn't think much about them at that time. I've been at All Ball about 3.5 years, so when I showed back up, a lot of things were familiar to me. A lot of the chemicals were the same, and a lot of the people in the business were still the same. The big change was biologicals, and the proliferation of biologicals has happened, like I said, relatively fast. You can't hardly pick up a newspaper. Nobody reads a newspaper, but you can't hardly read an article on the web or talk to anybody about, they want to talk about, the biological seed treatments that are out there. And, so your question around, are they going to replace synthetic chemistries? You've got sort of the main categories of fungicides, insecticides, nematicides. And inside of each one of those, there are biological, products. And, there's a lot of pressure right now with some of the state legislatures. You got New York that's already, banned neonics. It's granted it's in the future. And then you've got some other states that they've been after them for over a decade. And of course, 15 years ago, we thought neonics might go away, and they haven't. And I try not to use words like never all the time, 100% guaranteed. Never is a long time. So I'm not saying it'll never happen, but it could happen in the future. We're not planning for it right now that it's going to happen immediately. But today, where most of the seed treatments are at is, and I think we do this, and I think a lot of other companies are looking at this, where you have a pretty robust synthetic offering, synthetic traditional chemistry, and then that's being put together with a biological product, and that could be a biostimulant, could be a true biological product. You putting those together, and that's where we're seeing probably the biggest benefit today is when you put a synthetic chemistry together with a biological product. And with the regulatory pressure that I was talking about earlier, there could be a day when all we have available is biologicals. But today, it's really hard to put together a complete biological offering that would completely replace synthetic chemistry. When you think about the ultimate consumer of that product is the farmer, they would be at disadvantage today if we just use biological products. I mean, they're good, but broad scale across all the acres in the U.S. today, the best offerings are biologicals put together with synthetic chemistries.
So
now, in the future,
synthetics more is that foundational piece to really make
yeah,
sure you're
yep,
covering all the basic diseases and everything else, and
correct.
then adding the biologicals on top.
That's right.
I interrupted
Yep.
you. You started to say in the future, if you would continue with that.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, you mentioned all balls in biologicals, and we certainly are. I mean, when I came here, I wasn't. I mean, I knew we had some biologicals. I wasn't completely aware of what all of it was, and I like to say that we were in the biologicals before they were cool, right? They were 9-10 years ago. About 9 years ago, All Ball kind of got started with biologicals. but it was all based on the fact that we thought someday neonics were going to go away. And so we had to find a insecticide that could really do that. Of course, we all know that now that hasn't happened yet, but it could. And so that's a lot of work we're doing now is to say, hey, what if that day comes? There's not going to be one product that replaces a neonic if it goes away, but you just use that as an example. You could put together an offering of biologicals in the future, and that's the stuff we're looking at and testing to say, if that day comes, what will we do? I mean, I think in soybeans today, you could do it easier than you could in corn, with a biological. But, if that eventuality comes, we're all going to be in the same boat. And, it's going to be, that'll be a big issue for independent seed companies if that day comes, where a neonic is no longer there as an option on corn and soybeans. It obviously choosing other crops. New York is not an I state, right? But they have 1 million acres of corn in Western New York. So it just creates a lot of complexities for the business. If you sell in New York, you have to say, we're treating our corn all this way everywhere else, but then we got this 1 million acres in New York that we got to do something different with. So it just builds in complexity. So it's more of an irritant. Find yourself where a big state in the center of the corn belt says you can't use neonics anymore. That will be a whole different situation. And so I think that's what originally drove some of the biological compounds, but it's not just about neonics. I mean, that when you think about seed treatments, that's the big one. It's used on a lot of acres, but it's much bigger than that, right? I mean, you look at all the basic manufacturers, we don't have to name them, you know who they are. Over the past 5 years, they've all purchased a significant biological company. And that's not just about seed treatments. That's about foliar applications and other things. Seed treatments is always kind of what they get to after they get the foliar work done. That's all just based on this trend of EPA regulation and changes in how products are regulated. So it's more about looking into the future of what are we going to do in agriculture when things at the EPA, they've gotten more challenging. I would maybe say over the past 5 years. The trend is it's probably going to continue to be that way. Biologicals are regulated a little bit differently, depending on whether it's a biostimulant or there are a lot of biologicals that are regulated by the EPA, but the registration process, it's a little friendlier than synthetic chemistries. And so that's what's driving a lot of this biological work over time by not just us, by the whole industry. But it's just a sea of things right now, and there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, a couple of different things that come out with that. So obviously, big trend towards moving towards biologicals to address a few problems. We can come back and talk about neonics a little bit later. IPSA has been a longtime member of the Neonic Coalition, trying to support the neonic chemistries out there. But you're right, they have been under relentless attack over and over and over. But a lot of different things to unpack there. I was reminded that the original originator of that comment, you said we were in biologicals before biologicals were cool, was Ted Turner, who was in cable before cable was cool. Nobody should know that.
Yeah.
I don't know why I pick up these little bitty pieces of trivia. Catherine says
he's also a big landowner.
Ted Turner is. Do you know who Ted Turner is, Catherine?
He started
TBS and Turner Broadcasting and all that other stuff, and CNN.
Oh.
So there you go. He was cable when it wasn't cool. Regardless of that, bit of trivia. One of the challenges in biologicals that I continually hear, and Matt, I know that this is not your repertoire exactly, but is actually getting them out, getting good data, and looking at them in trial formats. We're trying that now with our IPSA seed trials. We've had it in first trials to be able to handle the genetic component. But, as we're looking specifically in that area, I mean, what are the challenges that we see? One of the challenges that I have identified and that we have on getting good data back in biologicals is actual shelf life. Mm-hmm. And how big of a problem is that today? I know that we're trying to work some things in the IPSA trials to make sure that we're actually treating at the point of planting, at the time of planting, to get more data on biologicals to make sure that we're getting the maximum use here. How big a problem is that? And Matt, in your experience, when you do, oh gosh, over 300 locations or close to 300 locations on trials around with first trials. I know y'all do basic seed treatment trials to really even it out with everybody, but how much of a problem have you seen that in your trialing experience?
Mhm. Yeah. So one of the things with the first trials that I think you hit on kind of one of the sticking points, I guess, that are one of the conversations I have a lot with both seed sponsors and with the farmers that are ingesting and using the data that we're producing through the first trials. We are, with our first published trials, that is a product test. And what I mean by that is, to us, a product is the combination of the genetics, the seed, and the treatments and how it was treated. So when a company puts in a product into our trials, that's what they're testing. So when we're having a conversation on seed treatments, we've got a ton of performance information on how specific treated hybrids and varieties perform and what the differences are. And we could have a PhD data scientist digging through our 30 years of data and finding some correlations there. But the one challenge we run into is it's not truly a treatment versus control test. So when we have a situation where, say, hybrid X from whatever company, pick your favorite one, is entered into our trials with, the cat's meow seed treatment, we get all kinds when it comes to how our products are treated that are entered into our trials. But we don't have that side by side with an untreated version. So we don't necessarily know within our first trials whether some of the additional yield that we're seeing on this heavy full rate, maybe pushing rate, seed treatment, hybrid, whether that is bringing extra yield. There's some assumptions and I think some fair guesses that we can make and kind of directional analysis that we can point towards there, but we don't necessarily have the ability to narrow it down to exactly this caused this. And that's a little bit of a, some would say it's a kind of a miss that we have, but really when you take a look at what our intentions are with our trials, it's to test products. It's to help farmers make the decisions of what companies to work with, what genetics and what seed products to plant on their farm. And that's what's so important about working with a good company when you're buying your seed, is you not only need to make the decision of which maturity and which trait package and which genetic background do you need for your ground. You also need a partner that can work with you to help you make that seed treatment decision to either make up for maybe holes in the kind of the resistance package that's in that hybrid, or maybe to address certain conditions that you've got going on out in your field. One of the things that we've been doing this last year and will be into 2026 is partnering with Earth Optics to get a much deeper look at the soil, what's going on under the ground, to see kind of all the different potential both pathogens and anything on the nutritional side of things. And so we're hoping that we can get a little bit better information that way. The farmers have that information as well. They're going ahead and taking a look at their soil analysis. They know the disease pressures that are out there. So these are all things that the seed treatment can help address. It's not always going to cover it 100%. Obviously, getting the best treatments possible and the best package put together is important. But then taking a step back to just trialing your specific question about the biological side of things, all of our first managers, in addition to running the first trials, so our public trials, we're all individual CROs, and so we're all doing different kind of trialings with different kind of companies, from Kansas to Delaware and North Dakota to Kentucky. So we've got a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different ways to manage that. And so really, I think the important thing is when you're putting together what I would call a competitive trial or a head-to-head, which one works, which one doesn't kind of thing, it's making sure that you've got products that are like. So you need to be comparing things that are both treated in similar ways. We need products that have similar shelf lives, in my mind, to make it the best possible comparison, because you want to make sure that you're giving those products kind of a real world look at how a farmer is going to treat them, because you can't always have it where your little seed packet to do your mini strip gets dusted up and thrown in the planter right away, right before, if that's the shelf life of that product. A lot of the times farmers are bulk treating, or they're, especially if it's an add-on product. When it comes to more of the what I would say, like the bulk treat, the stuff coming in the bag, kind of thing. Obviously, that's usually got a pretty good shelf life on it. It's designed that way, and I'm sure Chad could talk pretty heavily and extensively on the science behind that, and making those determinations on how to treat and when to treat. But when trialing, I really look at it as we need to compare like with like. Is we need to have similar conditions, of course. We also need to have similar products, because when we start going into these biologicals, the conversation I have with a number of the companies that I work with, and that our other managers work with, and is, well, taking it to a strict yield, a 3 bushel plus by adding our product isn't necessarily telling the whole story, right? Well, if you've got 5-6 different products all in the same plot, and one of them yields a little bit more than the other, obviously that's a win. But what we're really looking at with these biological products is the cause, and what's actually going on to drive that, whether it's addressing, once again, soil conditions, or a specific pathogen, or maybe it's a nitrogen fix. There's 1,000 different things, and I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on specific products or anything, but there is a lot of differences across different products within that biological sphere, that all do different things. And so being able to draw and have a simple yes it won or no it didn't win is probably kind of selling the story short on what actually happens out in the field.
So, Chad, when you're looking at these concepts, how concerned are you about, shelf life when you're talking like BioST and some of these other products that y'all have? And then what's the recommendation you have for seed companies on treating and time of treating to give back to farmers?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question that doesn't have a simple explanation. So it's going to take me a minute, but and I think it's a misconception about biologicals, is that somehow biologicals are all the same and they're all alive. They're all alive maybe at one point, but the delivery system as a seed treatment, they're not all alive, and they're not alive on purpose. And it's like that's when separation happens. And then because we have a lot of our products that they're non-living. It's the enzymes and the toxins in that brew when you're making the biological that does the work. And so we're not worried about shelf life. You can put it on the seed and it's good for, it's a lot like a synthetic chemistry that way. It doesn't die. We already killed it. And we did it on purpose. So you have that level of biologicals, and that's a lot of what we have, is we don't have to worry about them dying because they weren't allowed to begin with when we put them on the seed. And then you've got another set where, they have a period of time when they're alive, and it's pretty long. And you look at soybean inoculants as an example. I started out 30 years ago. It'll be 30 years in May, Todd, that I've been working in this industry. Hard to believe. Soybean inoculants were a big thing then, and they still are now. Difference is when you put soybean inoculants on 30 years ago, you better get yourself out in the field pretty fast, because if you don't, the chemicals on the seed treatments, that they don't right? They're going to kill them. And so the rhizobia will be dead by the time you maybe get done planting. Today they've got extenders in there. I mean, like food, you can keep those rhizobia alive for almost a year now in some extreme cases. So the technology just has gotten way better. And then you get to the other end of the spectrum, and I think this is a lot of what we're hearing about in the industry right now, as you talk about, dead bugs in a jug being delivered to farmers because they get put on the seed and they die before they get there. That's a real thing, because there's a big category of now seed treatments that they have a really short shelf life. They're gram negative, meaning they just don't survive very long, and they got to be put on real time. And I think a lot of the innovation that's happened there is just around the packaging, right? The delivery system of how you get those products there. There's some products that are pretty effective. You just got to have a way to get them in and around the seed right before you're planting. And in some cases that works for people. And so I think for biologicals, how we think about it is, tell me what type of biological you're using, and I can tell you, what that's going to be like, for the grower, and how you need to deliver that on the seed. Because even in traditional seed treatment where we're putting it on the seed, you have a lot of bacillus type of seed treatment products that, they're more of a, they have to, they're alive when you put them on the seed, but then when they get planted, they have to reproduce and colonize in the soil. That's what makes them work. But they're very sensitive sometimes to pH and temperature, and so I mean they have their own issues. But they're, they can be pretty effective. I mean, we've got a couple of those ourselves, and so it's not a simple answer, Todd. But there's a clear separation between, biological products maybe that aren't alive because they're not alive on purpose. That's how we want them to be. They're effective, and they act much like a synthetic chemistry. You don't have to worry about shelf life. You got another category that, maybe you got like a year, and that's a lot of these bacillus seed treatments, Bacillus firmus, Bacillus amylofiquiations. I can never say that one right, and there's a lot of those. You got Bacillus subtis. So those products, they can be good for a year.
You're doing a better job of saying those than I can do.
Yep. And then you got a whole bunch of, microbials, trichoderma, mycorrhizae, all that kind of stuff that it'll stay alive for a while. But then you got these products that literally you gotta put them on right when you're planting, or they might be dead. And I think that's a lot of products right now. And I think that's the, that's the, because I always think about how does this impact the farmer, right? And you can read about this great product and how it works, but you got to think about, am I going to get the benefit of it at planting? And that's where I think there's just so many biological biostimulants. You put them all maybe in one big bucket and just say biologicals, and it's just hard to sort through all the noise because it's kind of the wild, wild west right now in terms of what's out there, and it's really confusing for us that even work in the industry. It's certainly confusing for seed companies, because they're interacting with growers wanting to understand it, and it's just, and the growers terribly confused. They're very interested in trying it. They want to know about it. They want to learn more about it. It's just hard to find a trusted source, of information to say, hey, can you just cut through all this and tell me about the product, tell me about how do I apply it, tell me what the benefits are going to be and what's the cost. The cost benefit analysis is really what it comes down to. And biologicals have proliferated so much in the past, like I said, 5 years. It's just gotten really confusing and really hard for people to sort through.
No, agreed. And I think that's one of the things, to give a shameless plug, that one of the things that we want to try and accomplish through the IPSA trials in general is being able to give some guidance on that as, hopefully an unbiased, independent organization that, drives towards the independent seed company members a little bit. Anyway, that's our aspiration to do with that. But I do think that there is so much noise. It kind of harkens back to me again to, gosh, you mentioned 30 years ago when we had all the foliar BTs that were coming into the marketplace, and wow, everybody had one. The barrier to entry was on the ground. It was literally there, and there were accusations that that guy must have mixed that in his bathtub and put it in a jug and stuff. So there are, not to accuse any one company of doing that, but I mean, nonetheless, the barrier to entry on the biological systems are a lot lower. So there is just so many of them. And then, it seems like a lot of the data out there is specific to the company that's selling it. So, being able to sort through that noise and really come up with the facts of what's going on are one of the reasons that we want to continue to try and do the trials. So, as we're looking at this, and I mean, Matt, that comes back to you from a standpoint, and I like the way you characterize the first trials in particular as how you're doing with as more of a product trial, which is the whole thing. It's not just the genetic component. That is a component of it, but it is the entire product. How is it that you look at that? And, have you dealt with, some of these biologicals that needed to be treated at planting stuff for it to address that shelf life in your trials? And how do you handle that, or how have you handled that in the past?
Yeah. So the short answer is on the first trials, we take seed as provided and plant that. So we don't overtreat. We don't do anything else there. we would hate for our application to make the decide who wins or loses. If we we don't want to finger on the scale. We are completely impartial to the whole process. So we take the product as provided from the seed companies is the short answer with that. But I think looking at that, I think to plenty of even private trialing companies that we've worked with and things along kind of outside of the first trials. It's following protocol is really the simple answer to that. Exactly kind of what Chad talked with what the farmers are asking from these companies, essentially, what is it? When do I apply it? And what's it supposed to do? Are very similar to the questions that we need answered when working with partners on testing these products. So, we've done everything from products like, once again, like Chad mentioned, that have really long shelf life. Just with the nature of our business, we never test that out really, but we can sometimes we'll have a product in a packet for 30 to 60 days, depending on when it's packeted versus when it's planted. And then we have other ones that are, either, the bugs in jug kind of thing, where it's a live bacteria that we need to apply as quick to. And so we're applying that morning. So we're doing it right before the seed is planted, try to get it as close to the actual planting of the product as possible. And it's all about matching what the product needs. And that's also that we give the product the appropriate analysis and the appropriate comparisons there. We want to treat it the way it's supposed to be treated, the way it was designed to be treated, so that we can go ahead and get relevant real data. And that's one of the challenges. Now, of course, if we've got a huge private trial of all kinds of different products that all have different application timelines and lifespans, it gets a little complex. That's kind of the fun of putting the puzzle together as well. And so, we're looking at a lot of different things. Obviously, looking forward to hopefully partnering with IPSA further in the future on different trialing opportunities. The thing that I've had come to us probably the most in my time with First is, is there a way that we can get a deeper look at seed applied products with this? That idea of the actual treatment versus a control on the seed treatments published kind of thing is exactly what farmers want. You bring up the wild west of how it is and how it has been. We look at a very similar world of the mid 90s when First came about, as that was kind of the world of genetics and traits and all the new things coming along there, and that was some of the clarity that we were working to provide at that point. We've done that for 30 years, and maybe there's a world to partner further and to try to provide some additional clarity from an independent source. But the same concerns as I brought up at the beginning with a competitive trial really play in. We need to compare like with like. We need to make sure that the drivers of yield are appropriately identified. We need to make sure that the analysis matches what the product is supposed to do. Things along those lines, which get really complex, and we like putting in variety trials. That's what we're good at. So it's a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to kind of work towards. But really, at the end of the day, it's all about making sure farmers have more information on these products so that they can make better decisions. And one of the great ways to do that is to partner with seed companies that are putting these products on and are investing in these products as well.
I want to pop back over to a comment earlier, the neonics, Chad. I mean, obviously, we've got situations, brewing in New York that are out there, and I see a couple of different things. One would be, unless you were really selling a heck of a lot of seed up there and doing some of the specialization, it'd be easy to say, you know what, we're not going to sell any seed in New York because we're not going to treat it differently than everybody else. Too many SKUs, too much inventory risk, too much of that kind of stuff. And likewise, if you're selling in New York and selling a little bit everywhere else, just to withdraw out and say, no, I'm only going to sell here, and make some of those choices like that. How big a risk? And neonics you hear a lot on them. From time to time, they're heavily attacked. Then it kind of wanes away, and you don't hear anything for a little while. How big a threat do you think neonics are in the majority of our market? So let's, the prime corn belt that we're talking about in the Midwest, the I-states, Minnesota, the middle of the country. Do you think Are you concerned about more risk there these days or no?
Well, we've been concerned about it
for speculation.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been concerned about it for 15 years, right? There was a lot of things around pollinators. They banned them in Europe. They banned them in Canada. And then they found out actually they can't grow canola up there unless they have them. So they actually brought them back. So they're being used again in Canada. There's precedent now of this happening because it happened in New York. You ask about the center of the country, and like a lot of things, it's highly political, right? And a lot of the things that get said and done and things, and if you read the text and you read the stuff that came out of New York, it's just like everybody's political position is what's being read, and some of it's pretty accurate, and some of it's not so accurate. And so I think it's it's hard to sometimes fight political political action like that unless you have strong organizations that can push back against it. And I think, I'm not an expert in, how text is written in legislation, but I've read different stuff about the piece out there in New York. And I think even within that, there's been a lot of workarounds that have been written in, and it's further out, so look, the risk is not zero, to be clear. But the risk is probably no more than it was 15 years ago, because the same sort of things that are being talked about then are being talked about now. I think there are a couple states, and I don't know if you want me to say who the states are, but there are a couple states that they're on the top five.
The states are.
Yeah, they're the top. They're in the top five, right? One is just to the west of Indiana, where I live. And the other ones up in the north, Minnesota, that are pretty hot on neonics. And so I think there's been a lot of activity in the state legislatures around that. It's just, it all comes down to the political traction that they can get. And like a lot of things that we've faced in agriculture, whether it be litigation on atrazine or glyphosate, it doesn't always come down to what are the facts of the case and what's the science say. It comes down to political action and the talking points of certain groups that don't like this or that. And I think that's to some at it. I mean, that's kind of, to me, that's where we're at with neonics. It's not a zero risk, but I don't think it's any more of a risk than it was 15 years ago. But it's one of those things where it happens slowly and then it can happen all at once. If one of those states in the Midwest goes down, then I think that creates a path for a lot of the other ones to go with it. Now, what I would say is we're way more prepared as an industry. I mean, we certainly are at Allball, but I think I can speak for, the industry. We're way more prepared for if that did happen. We have other options. There's other synthetic chemistries that are out there that could, not replace. I mean, the thing about a neonic is that it's just so unique. And, as you go south, Todd, and I've worked in the South, been up and down the Mississippi River several times, working in rice fields and things like that. And the thing about the South is that, there's always something chewing and sucking on the plant down there. And the thing about neonics is they're systemic, right? Yeah, they're very systemic, and it's hard to find products that can, do that on all those pests that are in the South. And that's where the gap, I think, will be agronomically for farmers. As you come north, it gets a little more manageable. It's not that we don't have chewing and sucking insects, because we do. But there's no one product that's going to replace a neonic. It's going to be two or three things. It's probably going to be a combination of some synthetic chemistries with some biologicals. The good news is, like I said, we're way more prepared today than we would have been 15 years ago if it would have happened. But it will change the dynamics of a lot of things, which we probably need to get into here, around how seed treatments are sold today on corn versus soybeans. It'll change the dynamics of the industry for independent seed companies and the farmers that they sell to. If neonics would be banned, because that completely changes the mix of the seed treatment, particularly on corn, right? Because corn's all treated by the seed companies down upstream, gets delivered to the farmer. Soybeans are a little bit different. They get treated a lot of times by a seed dealer or somebody out in the countryside, not by the seed company. And so it's a little bit different, but same problem. If there's not a neonic, you got to have to find something that, not completely replaces it, but mitigates as much as you can those agronomic realities of not having a neonic. And again, as you go south, I mean, you don't even have to go that far south. I'm talking like Southern Illinois and Missouri. You got these issues, where you have, you're going to miss a neonic pretty fast. And we'll all be in the same boat. Necessity is the mother of all invention. I think everybody's been planning for it, hoping it doesn't happen. But hope's not a real good strategy, and so we're prepared to the best we can be. And you go another 5 years, there's probably we'll be even more prepared. But we're not planning on it in our 5-year plan. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? I'm not prophesizing that it is or isn't going to happen, but we're preparing for it to happen. And if that day comes, we'll be prepared.
No, but there is one thing for certain: if we steward these products properly, we're going to keep them around longer. And it seems like one of the challenges is we get caught on fire occasionally when somebody really trips up on a product. And I'm thinking about the ethanol plant down in Nebraska that was telling everybody they're going to take the treated seed and we're going to do this and this with it, and then they just piled it up everywhere and created a environmental nightmare for everybody, including the community around it. And it was just bad actors. So, as long as we can be proper stewards and take care of what we're supposed to do, we're going to, not run afoul of regulatories and be able to keep things around a heck of a lot longer. Gentlemen and Catherine, I appreciate you this morning very much. I hope that you've enjoyed being on StalkTalk with us. And I hope everybody is getting some good information and getting ready for a very productive planting season coming up in 2026. And I do have to close with a bit of trivia because I do have to ask a question. So here's my question for the day. And it comes about because locally, the Walton Arts Center is putting on a play in Fayetteville. It's a Broadway hit that they're bringing in called Some Like It Hot. Now, here's the question. There was a movie called Some Like It Hot that had 3 really famous people in it. Who has seen the movie Some Like It Hot? Please show your hand.
I've never even heard of it.
I've never seen it.
Chad, come on, man.
If it's not Tommy Boy, I don't probably know a lot of movie history.
This is why America's going down in flames. Nobody knows the cool stuff. Some Like It Hot, 1959. Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, and Marilyn Monroe. Directed by Billy Wilder, is still today one of the biggest comedy films, maybe the greatest comedy of all times.
Never heard of it.
Claim.
God,
it laid the ground for Chris Farley.
We're doomed. We're doomed as a nation. And on that note, we'll see.
Is that my turn? Yeah.
Oh, it's your turn. It's your turn.
Yeah, it's my turn. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And obviously share the podcast with others so they can also be in the know.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.